Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. We continue with the conversation on the current state of play in our economy, and of course, doggedly following what is happening at the devolution conference in Uasin Gishu County, looking at some of the sentiments that are raised there, and of course, everyone talking very optimistically about the future of Kenya. And by the way, we have also Bile, who is saying hi to you guys, right? Bile is saying the future of Kenya is bright. Kudos to the president, right? And saying hi.
And to be good man.
Who is that, Bill?
There's Bile there.
Bill.
So he sends his greetings as well.
You know, Bill is now Kenyan. He left his US citizenship and to become a Kenyan.
Yeah.
And I signed his form.
Oh, you're the one who signed?
Yes.
It's naturalized.
To recommend him to be a Kenyan.
He was to bring something about water. Was it water to the NSC?
Yes.
What happened, Bill?
Did he follow through?
He's in
The last time, he was the chair of the Taita Taveta Water Board.
Yes, he's now in the county government.
Advice.
Yes, sir.
His advisor there is doing a good job.
He should have been at the devolution conference. Yeah?
No, but the water thing, you know, he was degazetted just like you are.
Oops.
He was one of the culprits who was degazetted as well.
As much as he wanted to make the changes, he didn't have the opportunity.
He never had the time to actually do so.
Maybe in answering that,
Yeah.
a former CEO of Kenya Airways is also saying, why is it that the IMF austerity measures are not subject to intensive public participation at each of the 47 counties assembly, including the diaspora, before implementation? A former CEO of Kenya Airways.
And we'll look at that as well when we're discussing the issue to do with the IMF and the fuel subsidy.
Right.
That IMF is also taking special umbrage on the fact that we have this fuel subsidy and the resumption of it. But let's just tone down a bit on the devolution. And I think I'd actually interrupted you before you took a short break. Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I was coming to the fact that, I mean, from what Kip has talked about India and the way they've been able to sort of do a lot of, put the fundamentals in place. And we talked about this issue of getting out a balanced budget. If you look at countries where things are working, it means two things. One, the government is deploying the funds that it receives in taxes to the right things at the right time and consistently. Right? I mean, one of the highest tax countries, I think, are the Scandinavian countries. Yeah, and those Scandinavian countries, you go there, everything works. The public transport system is working, health is working, power is good. You name it. All the basic essentials that you require to function as a country are working very well. But that means that whatever tax they get is being deployed to the right places at the right time and consistently. Here, I think the issue of the deployment of taxes is, I think, the big thing. If we are going to create a good infrastructure that allows people to be able to not worry about education, not worry about health, not worry about all these basic things that we need, people can then begin applying their hard-earned money into other places. And so I was coming back to the savings issue. People cannot afford to save in Kenya because their pockets are being attacked by a whole host of other things that they need as essentials.
If they have a pocket.
Yeah, if they have a pocket. Yeah, but if you had good education, free education, you had good health, which was affordable, etc., etc. You know, housing is yes, that is one. That's a big picture item. But most people in Kenya do live in a house, right? What you're trying to do is to upgrade the housing in which they're living in. But the basic services that they really spend money on is water, food, education for their children, health, and just getting to and from work. And all those are very expensive in this country. So where am I going to get money to save when I still have to pay for all this? And my taxes were supposed to make them affordable. And we come back to the cost of government. We come back to the cost of running the country. Ideally, that should really be looked at. Any corporate organization, we always say, the day you start getting into problems in terms of running a company, you begin to look at your costs. You cut down your costs, you look at your efficiencies, you look at all that until you're able to generate a profit. And for us, as a country, generating a profit out of the taxes is actually getting service to the people. And when that happens, then all these other things will begin to sort of come into place.
Absolutely.
So I think that the cost of government, we really have to focus on the cost of government and the efficiency of delivery. The whole essence of going on an e-platform for government delivery, for government services, that was a very lofty thing. And I think as a private sector, we are talking about that from 2010 or 2008-7, that time, about going to e-government, whereby services are delivered digitally. And therefore, you have a more efficient delivery of service. Now you're talking about putting, I don't know how many thousand services on
but weren't we way too early then? The fiber optics network also was not really as robust. Even access to internet.
The whole point is, as you're building that, you digitize as you build.
Okay.
So by the time that you go to every county and everything else, your systems are in place, and all you're doing is expanding. Yeah. IFMIS that was put in at that time those were lofty dreams, but IFMIS became a way of people sort of extracting money out of the government. They sort of corrupted it. So, over and above the issue of spending money well, the other thing we really need to work on our national culture, the way we think. At the moment, everybody is, and excuse me, I mean, let me not be taken to use this word wrongly. Everybody is a hustler in a negative manner, right? If we are positive hustlers, right, and the way we think about it was right, then this country will go a really long way.
Mm-hmm. Could we talk about, as we're winding up on the devolution, or the on-source revenue? Because we've seen the statistics as well, it's been dipping. For every county, on-source revenue has remained to be such a problem. How could we maybe raise the ante, or up the ante, so to speak? Because we have different counties which are endowed differently. So to expect a certain county which is maybe endowed with minerals, and other countries which is endowed with something that will be maybe taken to be a bit inferior to the minerals, the on-source revenue will be very different.
Let me step back before I come to OSR, on-source revenue. And once upon a time, I was driving, and among the people who have encouraged me to get a car you can drive was him. I never told him, but I had just come from the US, and I'm driving Uhuru Highway, coming to the roundabout. Then who do I see this guy next there with a BMW? Like, hey, Keith, what have been happening? And I said, let me get something. So I bought a car, and I met this young lady who used to work with an NGO, Aga Khan, and he told me, hey, and I'll put in Q and translate, ni matigali mada. What she said, matigali is remains, that is stomach. So saying, the stomach is okay. What has remained, you have bought a cow. Which means what Keith is saying. If you are going to go to the NSC or buy there, you must have met your fundamentals. Food.
So the NSC, NSC is the last resort now. It's a bakshishi that we need to invest in.
And it made a lot of sense, because when you look savings, is when individuals or household or companies really have met the necessary obligation. Then they have now opportunity to save. And then we go to the fundamental. If we can't, I can't even meet the food, then becomes a difficult. But coming to own source revenue, and this is what even if you look at the medium-term plan 4 has been pushing for counties. What is this? And Demo was a very interesting. Had an opportunity to link up with Demo now in Europe as an ambassador. We used to go to PS's meeting. Had an opportunity to do that, and you say, I don't need money from Treasury, but just give me this, I'll make more. We tend to be now the other counties give. But there are a lot of areas. Look at Turkana. I'll take a county like Turkana, which gets the second chunk of devolved funds than Nairobi. Lake Turkana, it's, if you go around it, it has a bigger coastline than from north coast to south coast of the Indian Ocean. And it has fresh fish. Those are things we can read it from your own source revenue that they can utilize. And the point that Patrick's making, last night I had an opportunity, I was reading through and I found this. Can Gambia meet its obligations in terms of their 2022 budget? And they were talking about balanced budget. And they said no, because we're budgeting, you have 10 shillings, but they're budgeting for 20. It doesn't make sense at all. And therefore, it goes back to what you're talking about own source revenue. If you as a county, we are going to raise 5B, as much as possible, that 5B, what we are going to do must reflect that. As you actually look at your CIDPs, county development plans. And it's very interesting when you do accounting, you remember Kimura, was he the one teaching fundamentals of accounting?
Yes.
Kampe Kamtoe. Very interesting. Kampe Kamtoe. Kampe credit, Kamtoe debit. So you must balance the book, those two. At the end of the day, you talk about that country or county balanced because of what they get and what they spend. So a good idea of own source revenue, and I think the national government should also appreciate these counties can raise their own funds.
Right, that's the question. Can the counties raise their own funds? Because we have also the Speaker of the Senate saying the counties should actually stop being reliant on the Treasury.
But the national government
It's
has
been
never
10 good
let
years.
the counties go.
But the President has been categorical that within 60 days, all those functions that are supposed to be devolved, they should have been devolved. It's given the 60 days to do that.
But Diba, you're right, and I can stand here and say anything. I can. But I'll be checked by how much have I implemented.
All right, let's just discuss about that then.
Yeah.
Also,
Borrowing from what my professor here has said, you know, there's always a give and there's a take. When we look at on-source revenue, it requires that money be levied. It's either a fee, a levy, a license to be levied against a third party who would obviously be a business person or a consumer or an individual resident of that county. So I believe myself that as a country, we are already taxed enough. And I believe that the money that the exchequer passes on to the counties is enough to make those counties sustainable.
should the exchequer continue disbursing this money?
I have no problem with that. I think myself, let the taxation be the domain of the national government. Let them disburse to the county governments. Let the county governments then, deliver on their functionality in terms of providing, an enabling environment to those counties for businesses to thrive, for prosperity, for individuals. Debal, we cannot tax ourselves into prosperity. I think it is a wrong premise. And I've said it before on this show that, running an enterprise, like a hospitality enterprise in the counties, requires 17 compliances. So if you're running a small enterprise and you have 17 different compliances, including all these on-source revenue from the counties, be it liquor licensing, national government, branding licensing, etc. I mean, we are creating an environment that is so stifling for any business to grow. And what I have noted, and we did a research when I was still in the Chamber of Commerce, is that Kenyans generally are very compliant and they would like to pay taxes. But it gets to a point where if you officially pay every single levy and tax and comply to everything that you're supposed to, you will not have a business. So the shortcut that many of them take is that they actually don't comply. And that is then creates rent-seeking opportunity for the different agencies that are supposed to be collecting from the different enterprises. And for me, I go back to the issue of cost that Patrick Obath had alluded to. You see, the moment we have a cost culture that is untenable, then it puts just more pressure for this revenue to be created. I have spoken about it, and I want to hit the nail on the head. This per diem culture that we have created in this country, so where everybody feels like you must, be a wealthy person. Where if you have public officers having more money than business people, you can't grow a country, because you see, you've got to have a situation where if you are in public service, you are there to serve. Let the enterprise owners be the ones seeking wealth. Yeah, but then you see, if you go and check now today, I don't know what the ratio of per diem is on gross remuneration for our public officers in this country. Obviously, this per diem is necessary from the point of view that hospitality industry has to survive. But I think for me, we've pushed it far too.
It's 40%.
We've pushed it to the limit.
Did you see that
where
particular
actually officials create a reason to go and sit in hotels to discuss very minute issues just for them to earn that daily stipend.
To learn how to operate an iPad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, on source revenue, I would say it's a no. I mean, I think let's reduce.
That's not fair.
But it's true.
How to operate a iPad?
Yeah. Did you see some MCs are going to benchmark on how to operate an iPad? Surely. Which country do you live in? Right? and the question is, again, because what he's saying, we saw just recently when we had the Salaries and Remuneration Commission scrapping some of his per diems and allowances that are there. A junior officer who's earning a ballpark figure of around 150,000, but he's pocketing in per diem per month almost 600,000 shillings, right?
Yeah.
Compared even to they were running now, compared to the salaries maybe that is maybe in the constituent of the Inspector General of Police, and this is a junior officer. This is an abuse because 20,000 shillings per day is what now is going as to the accounts as per diem.
So what actually hit me quite strongly with what Lynn Mengich, SRC chair, she's a consummate professional about in the HR world. I mean, we worked with her together, and I fully 100% respect the fact that she's doing a job to the best ability. The issue of people, I have a job and then I'm being paid to go and do my job somewhere else, right? I'm being paid an allowance to go and present my case to somebody else. That for me was probably that is an indication of really how badly it got. Right? If I'm employed and I'm representing Patrick Obath Inc. and I go to this place to go and talk about a product or whatever it is, or to give advice on a specialty that we have as a company, will I then say that I need to be given an allowance to go to X over and above my salary to do what I'm supposed to do, right? And that is a huge amount of money that people are getting over and above the per diem to actually go and stay there, right? The per diem, yes, you can talk about, but the fact that you're being paid to go and sit and do your job, which you're being paid for anyway, for me was something that I felt we were really draining money out of all these organizations where people sit in that particular area. So I think just the cost of doing of county governments and everything else, we really need to drop it right now. And going back to own source revenue, I think that whole area, what needs to happen is that with the money that is given by the central government, the county government needs to create an enabling environment for investment to come in. And when investment comes in, money begins to circulate in that county. And when that happens, then you get investments, growing investments, and the county becomes a lot more attractive. And at the end of the day, then all these small levies that they're doing, there's hundreds of things that they are doing small levies on that gives them a lot more money. But they have to create an enabling environment to attract people to come and invest in that place. Yeah. So, and there is enough money for that to happen. It's just that it's not being deployed to that end. Yeah, the counties I think are at 50%. 50% of the money they get is actually salaries. That is too much.
That is too much.
Absolutely.
We need some auditing there. Shemi wanted to say something.
Yes, on the on-source revenue. But before that, allow me, I'm looking at a newspaper, I think it's People Daily, page 18, Home Africa stock up 9.86%. I am trying to justify my optimism because, I mean, for those who've invested in Home Africa along other stocks, that's good news. But on revenue, the BAL, I learned that my neighboring county of Kisumu raises about 1 billion shillings a year. But I'm also alive to the fact that one of our members, a retired banker, did do a study of Kakamega County, how much resource there is, the mining activity going on in that part of the country, raises about 6 billion shillings a year. Kakamega County, I think, gets about 7 billion shillings every year from the exchequer. Clearly, if own resources were well managed in Kakamega, and I'm optimistic on this, buoyed by what I confirmed by a leading mining company in this country that may not be too well known. that did indicate that Siaya County alone has got more gold resources than the whole of Zimbabwe. I don't know whether that's true, but they are
Siaya County.
Just Siaya County.
You come from Siaya.
I think
I'm moving today.
Yeah. What are we doing in Nairobi?
so.
More than Zimbabwe.
The ball.
I know, but I cannot say.
You know what you cannot say.
The point.
You have to be careful information so that you go and explore fast.
No. I know a lot more about what he's talking about.
The point I'm making is there's a whole lot of resources that the country could take advantage of. And talking of the better agenda, obviously there's 5 priority areas. I did gather that in addition to the 5 priority areas of agriculture, health, creative industry, affordable housing, MSMEs, there is also the underlying aspect, apart from cooperatives as a cross-cutting issue. They talk of the blue economy and the mining sector. In my view, if these sectors could be harnessed, maybe buoyed by energy, maybe one thing that hasn't been sufficiently addressed is the cost of energy. I was watching President Museveni talking about looking at the problem in Niger in terms of cost of what's called kilowatt hour per capita. That may be a major problem of Niger is the uranium that produces nuclear energy. And he checked and found that the kilowatt hour per capita is about 50, compared to about 10 plus thousand kilowatt hour per capita in the countries that are fighting over this product. And then he decided to check the per capita for Uganda. I was being told for Kenya it's about 150 compared to Uganda, which is about 3 times ours. And he's decided that Uganda is going nuclear to get about 15,000 megawatt hour. Maybe Patrick, being a specialist in this area, could guide. But as a physicist, I think it's time that Kenya, we must tackle the issue of affordable energy. And we have shied away from nuclear for too long. I don't see many other ways. I know we've done geothermal and all, but we must address the cost of energy.
Yeah, still on the source of revenue. As we're winding up, because the biggest issue as well, and I know Kiprono has been speaking very movingly regarding the pending bills. Now we have the pending bill starting at 567 billion shillings. This is to the suppliers from the counties. This has not been addressed, despite the fact we have the money disbursed. But the pending bills still, I think, will be taking the lion's share of that particular money that has been disbursed from the exchequer.
You know, the pending bills is a cancer that has actually, led to the demise of such a large number of businesses in this country, and that has actually led to so many people being out of gainful employment. Pending bills is a problem that dates back to the first administration of this country in 1963, and I don't know for what reason. I think the only period that we've had a semblance of order on the issue of pending bills was during the 10 years of President Kibaki's rule, where he issued a dictate that government should only expense that which they have in their coffers. It should not be a speculative venture. And at this point in time, and this is a topic that I advocated on strongly when I was the leader of the Chamber of Commerce. You see, for as long as people are paid late, we are adding a much greater cost, to the economy. We are leading to a lot of businesses being unprofitable, and furthermore, we are also creating a lot more rent-seeking opportunity for public officials. So the issue of pending bills is one that I believe can only be dealt with through legislation. I think there should be an active legislation that actually governs the whole matter of pending bills. Yeah, there should be, very clear guidelines insofar as how long it should take and what interest the government will pay in the event of delayed bills. But at this point in time, I think, the president has pronounced himself strongly on this issue, but we haven't yet seen enough action. That's why I passed the challenge on to the county government, following on Governor Waiguru's comment yesterday that they have been paid on time, that I do hope that suppliers too will be paid on time.
Consider on this as well.
But I think there's a very good payment avoidance scheme that the national government and the county governments have got.
Payment avoidance.
Yeah, they have these task forces that are formed to review the bills and whatever it is. How many times do they have to audit those things?
There's a sitting allowance, as Deba would say. So they have to.
No, I mean, there are things that have been audited so many times.
Just pay.
And they have not been paid. And every time the report is put in, it goes quiet. And then somebody brings up the issue that people have not been paid. They have another audit again for those things. It is ridiculous that we have a country where we're doing that kind of stuff. And yet, when you're contracting, and the law of contracting is very clear, that once you've delivered, you get paid, right? So
the issue of auditing should not even arise.
There's all the things you must meet before you put in an invoice to be able to get paid. And the internal mechanisms within the governments, whether county or national, should be the ones that make sure that prior to invoicing, all the conditions have been met. Now, our culture in this country is the problem, where people do substandard work, and then internally somebody comes and approves it. So that mistrust that has been built into the system is what is creating these pending bills. Because nobody trusts that an invoice that has been given is for work that has actually been done. They think there's always something behind there. So I think we really need to look at this whole procurement process and put in place systems that will ensure that the things are done right. And when you invest,
even if you have a contractual, it can be
done with there's a lot of technology that can do that.
Blockchain.
We've also got these situations whereby the citizens can actually supervise. If you have a contract for a road, and tell the people who are along that road, this is the contract that has been done, this is what's going to be done, and these are the guys who are going to do it.
If you do that in private sector, you close the job the next day.
And say, fine, this is your road, make sure it is built in accordance with what we've told you, and then you will be the people to sign off that the quality has been done.
But the issue of trust is what is actually exacerbating and compounding the issue. That so far you have a contractual agreement, yet you don't meet some of the specifications there. And then you've invoiced. I think that this is what has now elicited so much reactions on this auditing, because how then do you ascertain that what we're paying has been done in a country where we normally pay for air,
but
which has not even been delivered?
Can you trust the auditors? Can you trust the auditors? Can you trust the auditors?
Can you trust the auditors?
It's
the compounding. So you don't trust the suppliers, you don't trust the procurement process, you don't trust even the auditors themselves.
Data is the answer.
Blockchain.
But talking of data as well, and blockchain and the digital, we have also a legislation in Parliament right now that seeks to make sure that our degrees, they're electronic, they're digital, so that they can be verified. So the fraudsters out there, because we have in the public sector.
We have some people who recently gave some degrees from Peru. I don't know.
The Bali, if I may,
please.
On the aspect of data being the new currency, we need so much of it. And this, of course, blockchain being the platform that allows that to happen. And I was delighted, and I'm hoping at an appropriate time, government, this better program is going to be brought to the public for public participation, for input. But I did gather that one of the underlying issues is the use of artificial intelligence and blockchain and data, to collect data so that decisions are made with regard to whatever key sectors government is addressing. I remember a question being asked by a specialist in this area who said he'd met 3 governors and was asking them, who among you can tell me how many bags of cassava were sold out of your county in the past 6 months or 2 weeks? None of them could give an answer. Or who among them could tell them how many accountants hailing from their place are working in Nairobi or in Machakos? This guy says, for me, at the press of a button, 2 minutes, I can give you that information. In fact, he was able to deduce that, whereas at that time, Kenya was saying, I think we had about 40,000 schools. When he did a quick check, he found that of those 20,000 schools, of those 20,000 schools, about 200 of them were non-existent. About 100 of them, their geolocation, they were in the Indian Ocean. You know? So data is a currency, and I'm hoping going forward, government's going to implement to invest more on data systems so that we have data-driven decision making. But while on that, also the energy aspect. In fact, Kenya's perhaps topmost nuclear scientists are just text a message here on nuclear and requesting, is it possible to get the clip about nuclear energy per capita consumption of electricity in Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, with the realization that uranium fuel is a train we have missed catching. This is Dr. David Otuoma, previously a senior inspector at IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, Austria. He's saying that that's the direction we need to go because it's one way of getting clean energy and affordable. And if we feared nuclear, we could have the stations in the ocean, the BAL, if we utilized our skills and knowledge that's available, bring down the cost of power.
The mini reactors.
But to respond to my friend, I mean, Kenya at the moment, with about 3,000 megawatts of power, we hardly have the uptake, especially during peak supply. And I think the challenge that we have is that we need to create an environment that attracts enterprise. We need to be able to, like for example, if we go to many of the places where geothermal resources produced, and I know that the production cost goes as low as even $5 per kilowatt hour, why is it that we haven't been able to attract even some of these crypto mining companies, these data crunching companies, to be able to come and set up their data farms to use our peak power consumption? And many of these areas have also had SEZs gazetted in the environs of those surplus energy resources. But we haven't been able to do that. We haven't been able to create the employment. We haven't been able to generate income.
To me, keep the whole thing of nuclear is hot air.
Yes.
Let's first do what we have. And I think we have this tendency, I want to be big. But have you used the fundamentals you have? Really?
Yeah. But it's not big.
I used to debate.
I think that will be a very...
We think big, eh?
Allow me to respond. Allow me to respond. I barely disagree with my colleagues. But I remember...
Colleagues or colleague?
My two colleagues.
Both of them, okay.
Because I have been in this journey for a while. When we were trying to get computers into Kenya, no less than a former head of state said, in a rally, Kenya doesn't need computers, they'll take away jobs. When we were bringing internet into this country, a similar story. I want to submit today that maybe 5-10 years down the line, we will be vindicated in terms of going this direction. Why do I say this? I remember when we were pushing for broadband about 15 or 20 years ago. No lesser than experts from even World Bank were saying, no, Africa does not need broadband. It just needs narrowband. We didn't need the fibers. There is what we call suppressed demand. We have 3,000 megawatts. But there is a lot of untapped capacity which we could unleash. It's not because that 3,000 megawatts is enough. No. I believe Kenya's got scope to produce more. I fully agree with the Kip in terms of energy alone supply is not enough. It must go in tandem with policies that are attractive, conducive to attract investors. But to say that the 3,000 may be sufficient, I've heard that, just like I heard of Kenya not needing broadband. We all know now that we are enjoying Wi-Fi, high speed. We probably even need higher speeds. And government is making effort towards the 100,000 kilometers of fiber.
I think, Shem, nuclear will come, not in the form and shape that we know it now. It's going to come as micro-nuclear or small nuclear reactors.
Reactors, yeah.
Right? Which are giving 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts. Currently, if you have to build a nuclear reactor, you have to go to 1,000 megawatts plus, which you don't need. That kind of technology, I don't think we need to have enough.
You don't need to invest
in small
right now.
Nuclear reactors that you can build and just bring in modules, right? Module and then put into place. Those are actually, they've come out to the experimental stage. They're being commercialized now in the US and I think in China. And those are the ones that are going to become the future of power, right? Small modular nuclear reactors. But talking about power in this country, if you look at the 3,000 megawatts, there was a plan to get up to about 5,000 megawatts, right? As a country. But what was it premised on? The SGR was going to be electrified. That was the first thing that was going to happen. It was going to be built as an electric train system. That hasn't happened. So, second thing, this
We need
this
90
last
billion
mile.
shillings the last time I
Yeah?
checked. To
This
electrify.
last mile was also going to generate this pent-up capacity for Kenyans to consume electricity, which has not happened. Although the last mile has been extended almost to every part of the country, right? But people are not consuming electricity the way it was envisaged under the last mile connectivity. And you find a lot of those people who have been connected on the last mile are not actually consuming electricity. And these wires going to, 1 kilometer to a user at the very end there, yeah, that whole wire is just heating up the environment and consuming power, which is a loss. So I think that, again, for me, it's execution. I said I would come back to this one so many times.
But,
right?
but I think
This issue of we have a we've got pent up opportunities in terms of energy, yeah, consumption, but it needs to be rolled out in a systematic manner. The SGR should have actually been built from day one as an electric, as an electric train, all the way through.
What it does, it has opportunity.
Yeah.
It was built in a way that's enough. You can actually have the power in. But if you look at the 5,000 megawatts, and Engineer Joroge, who was a PS now, not in government, very, very elaborate. The highest was coming from geothermal. Actually, if you look, what with that 5,000? Geothermal, we're talking about wind, solar.
And then hydro.
Hydro was the last.
Yeah.
There was no nuclear about it. The premises was, and I like the comparison Shem is bringing. And I think in a way you are comparing, I don't know what. When you say broadband, and we are against, that's a very important thing where everybody benefits, and you have the opportunity. So you can't take that and justify for the nuclear. And even the issue, and when you look in terms of the potential we have, I think we are either third or fourth in the world in terms of geothermal. We haven't exploited enough. Of course, the cost of drilling, all that. Wind, sun.
Yeah. Solar.
So there's opportunities there. We keep, we
But we're in a barnacle. We have our feet a ball in a chain right now with the IPPs.
Yeah.
We have to endure for the next 50 years in that prison.
But go what Kip is a very strong point he's bringing.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you cannot address the cost of doing business, one of the costs of doing business manufacturing is power. Forget it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think
The
the
right
let me
of
just say
reply.
a very quick comment. I mean, I wouldn't want to underrate the knowledge and experience of Shem Ochodo, because I'm sure, he's a man who's very traveled the world and he's been in the highest echelons of academia, and I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. I had very robust conversations with the late Karanja Kabage about nuclear, and I would want to even do the same with Shem Ochodo. But I think let's start with the answer. What are Kenya's competitive and comparative advantages? What is it that we can do that can take us to scale both in the continent and globally? What are the goods and the services that we can give to the world that then require energy consumption? Having done that, then we look at, we need to look at industries like agro processing. We need to look at industries like crypto mining. We need to look at the mining industry that Obath was talking about earlier, fuels, fossil fuels, etc. We need to look at the transport industry like the SGR, the possibility of a tram network here in Nairobi.
Sure.
We need to look at the service industry for Kenya being the back office for the world. How much energy is required? What are those sources? And I would want to hear from Shem what the US dollar kilowatt hour cost would be for nuclear vis-a-vis our most efficient geothermal sources, compared also with wind and solar, as Professor has just talked about. Once we start with the answer and say what is it as a country we want to do, then I think we go back to what are the resources that could be deployed towards making that a possibility.
I think you should stop keep reading my notes. I'm doing a presentation in September. And it's very interesting because, I'll come to you, Shem. It's very interesting because I'm looking from there, and I like the first one. If you have Africa and map it in agro-processing, it's like everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Then you ask yourself, what kind of power we need? Not so much, really. These sources can. And I like the point you bring, mining, transport. And I'm talking on a world forum, but focusing on Africa we want. And that's the premises I'm really having the discussion on. So that the Koreans will bring you the TVs. But we sell them finished avocados,
Right.
and all that kind of thing, and we do all the trade.
But talking about resources,
look at
you wanted to
Yeah.
respond.
Look at
Yes,
Ethiopia.
I wanted
Ethiopia has a Grand High Dam.
Yes.
They're producing power at $3 per kilowatt hour, 6,000 megawatts.
Yeah.
So if you're an American industrialist, you'll need to make your analysis and say, where will I take my industry?
Indeed.
Yeah, thank God that we have security and peace here.
It's a good
Yeah.
resource.
It's
The
a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's a comparative
The
advantage indeed.
just to clarify that, in the case of the energy mix, it's not so much the case of one against the other. I think we need the Kenya energy mix policy did anticipate that we'll be having all these different energies. And in terms of cost, the nuclear production cost is largely comparable, of course, with solar as well. I think for a small, although Patrick was talking of 100 to 100 megawatts of nuclear microreactors, for 1,000 megawatts, which is considered a small one, for $1 billion, you get that done. So one can work their mathematics. So it's largely comparable. While I didn't mean to root so much for nuclear, I think the major fear people have is, do we have enough capacity of an accident happening? But this is where I was giving the
security
option.
aspect, yes.
Yes, there is the option that you could have these micro or mini reactors deep into the ocean, that even if there was a crisis, they are so far away into the ocean. But yes, in terms of recognizing the need for diverse energy mixes, my premise is that there's nothing that would stop us to export energy. If we had the for me, I would even put it for 10,000 megawatts at a minimum for Kenya. Nothing would stop us exporting, because for now, I think we're still importing some energy from the neighboring countries. So I would still, maybe at another session, have a conversation that we need to look at these various avenues that are going to give us sufficient energy. And I take the position, and as Kip is saying, there are some of those rigs you need for mining the cryptos. You would need a lot of energy, and there are the various other needs that have been specified.
But
He can take us for a day retreat, no per diem.
No, I can't go in the per diem.
Just for everybody's information, nuclear power will cost 3 US cents.
3, okay.
3 to 4 US cents.
Yeah,
So
It's very reasonable.
It's very reasonable.
comparison to the geothermal?
Yeah,
No, it's in the same
still-
kind of
Same
same kind of ballpark. Yeah.
okay.
And it's green.
All right.
Green energy.
And it's green energy.
Sure.
So could we maybe just orient also our thoughts towards now this U-turn by government on the subsidy? People have been raising also scruples around it. The IMF, I think, has also spoken about it. They are concerned about the resumption of the fuel subsidy. The president says it is not resumption to the subsidy, but it is a stabilization policy. Whatever that is, that we want to maybe unpack and understand what is this stabilization policy, because I think we've had on this particular table discussing when President Tinubu also came to power in Nigeria, he pulled that particular rag of subsidy and threw the country in a topsy-turvy situation where he had to call also a state of emergency because of food crisis in Nigeria. So could we talk about this subsidy? Is the government now going back to what it had actually spewed and vomited?
Patrick has been doing some research.
Well, I expected that question today. So.
He has been doing research since we came.
I think and it's not research actually.
Yeah,
this
of
was
course.
years back. There's always been a talk of putting a stabilization fund in a country for fuel and for a lot of other things. But for a stabilization fund to work, you have to establish your target fuel cost for the economy. And once you've established that as your benchmark cost, then when the price of fuel globally goes down, you keep it at that cost. So you're actually, as the price goes lower, you're putting money into the fund. Yeah? And then when the price goes above that target fund, then you begin to draw out of it. Unfortunately, the fuel industry is such that those swings are extreme. And there has not been a single country in this world that has had a stabilization fund that worked. South Africa is the one that tried a lot of that. Was the biggest user of stabilization funds in Africa. That completely failed. And they actually stopped it. Because they were finding that the government was actually paying out money that they didn't have in this idea of stabilization, of keeping the price of fuel at this within a certain band, which is what stabilization does. The amount of money that is being charged as a fuel levy, which is what they're calling the money they're going to use in stabilization, that amount of money cannot stabilize fuel for more than 2 months in this country, even a month, because the amount you're collecting from the petroleum development levy was actually not intended as a fuel stabilization fund. It was actually intended for developing petroleum infrastructure. Like, for example, if you want to go into LPG, right? We put that money in to kickstart that particular part of the petroleum sector, or also doing other developments as well in terms of research, or if you're going to do an exploration and there's something special required. The Petroleum Development Fund was for exactly that, development. But in its wisdom, in 2020, the government decided, no, let's also include the element of stabilization. So the amount that was being extracted with the Petroleum Development Fund was increased in 2020 by about 100%. So we were paying more from then. And
so we've been paying the stabilization fund all through.
We have been paying petroleum development levy every time you buy fuel. You're paying for it. I think it's about 5 shillings a liter. Yeah, and that goes into a fund. I don't know whether they even have a commissioner, because that whole thing was supposed to be under a commissioner in the ministry, in the treasury, so that it could be controlled and be disbursed on the basis of what the act says it should be used for. But in 2020, they decided to include stabilization, because that was now the talk of the world, that we're going to try and stabilize the price of fuel. But in my view, and I think it will be borne out by every single country that has tried it, stabilization will not work at all. We are just applying it now to reduce the costs from being above 200 shillings. That was, that going above 200 shillings was a big thing.
So what is the clarity? If you may just make it very limpid for us. Is it a subsidy? Is it a stabilization? No, we're lost in the semantics.
It is purely...
Can the government be...
It's just an intervention to avoid the price going above 200 shillings a litre.
It just means you will not pay much for the... That's it.
It is not sustainable.
It is...
In the previous government, they tried to use that stabilization fund, quote, yeah, to fund the subsidy. How much is still owed now? 29 billion shillings to the oil companies, because the government did not have enough money to actually make sure that the price was kept low. So it is a subsidy, it is a whatever it is, whatever name you give.
And this is pegged also on the dollar.
It's not pegged to the dollar.
No, I'm just asking, what would they all this particular marketers...
The price of fuel is not just pegged on the dollar. There's a whole host of things that happen. Okay. The cost of transportation could be an issue because there's not enough tankers. Yeah.
No, I'm asking because now with the dollar
there may be a refinery premium that has gone up because so many refineries shut down in the summer. Yeah, so that getting product is
no, what I'm asking is maybe on the contractual agreement or the payment terms.
Yeah.
Not dollar being the factor of maybe is the contractual agreement in dollars or
which contract?
With the marketers, with the people who are owed.
Marketers?
Yes.
Everything works in dollars in this country.
So at 150, we're talking about 29 billion shillings, which is bound to also be rising.
That 29 billion was Kenya shillings that was owed in subsidies from 2020.
For 2020.
So is it rising?
That's what I'm asking. Is it rising?
It's not rising because it was denominated in Kenya shillings, yeah?
Okay.
Because that was a subsidy that was...
All right, it was at
the pump price.
That's what I wanted to get, okay.
But if you talk about now imports that determine the pump price, that is denominated in dollars.
Yeah.
And that is where the government, in its wisdom, decided that they were going to have this G2G arrangement, which was supposed to stabilize the dollar. Yeah, that was the idea.
Which never worked too.
Well, it stabilized at 150.
Okay. It's stabilized at 150.
I think for me, Debala, I'm no expert in that industry like Obath is.
Yep.
But I think for me, the important things are that we must have a predictable macroeconomic environment.
Yep.
And you see, if you look at the consumer index, the cost of fuel, fossil fuel, is an integral part of that. If you look at the inflation index, the cost of fuel is deeply embedded in that. If we look at the cost of living in its totality and even its impact on prosperity of individuals, the cost of fuel is in the middle of it. I was in Nigeria 3 weeks ago, and that was the day after President Tinubu took the fuel subsidy off. And for the first time, the streets of Lagos were empty. there was probably 20% of their vehicles on the road. 80% of their vehicles were not on the road because of the fluctuation that took place. Just made it untenable for people to enjoy the use of their own vehicles. That was at a very extreme case. I don't think Kenya has gotten there. My prayer is that the people who are tasked with the macroeconomic management of this country will be looking at all these factors, will be consulting with with industry experts like Obat to give us a predictable environment where inflation is tenable, where the cost of the interest rates are manageable, and where you can create a business case that can hold into 2 or 3 years and even prepare a business plan that would be tenable 2 or 3 years from now without some fluctuations that will affect the very basis of your enterprise. And if we don't have that, then there's no way we'll be having a conversation about prosperity.
Fluctuations will happen and things will change because of dynamic environment we live. And it's a whole concept of futures. We'll really get into the futures. How do you ring-fence yourself? And one of the key things perhaps this country has not done so strongly is the futures, commodity futures. So you're accurate, the farmer can. But you look at the country, I look at 3 things which really affect the core of any country: the food prices. And you look at the whole food prices, no idea we had in Agricultural Finance Corporation, all that, and coming with the SGR, not strategic, but strategic grain reserves. Was that for that purpose? So this, you can actually manage that by sustainable grain reserves. And Nyoro, the former governor of Kiambu, when he was the food security advisor to the deputy president then, or deputy whatever it was, he wanted to come with that very clear, that he can monitor how the grains are behaving. And it's interesting, when you come to technology, he was asked, who tells you we want to know that? Because we manage, we get, when we say import maize, the location was in the ocean. Those locations they come in.
The geolocation.
So you can manage something like food or grains by that. And it's important, like now we have bumper harvest.
Right.
This is now to put that. Come now to fuel. The same thing you can. Singapore, one of the key areas where Singapore really benefits is that Singapore doesn't have the resources. But you look at history, it imports a lot of steel. A lot. And keeps it.
Thank you.
The third one is power. The same thing has been talking about. So those three, if you look in the country, it affects the Mwananchi. Food, power will affect the Mwananchi in terms of manufacturing, and then the whole thing of fuel. And there are ways to ring-fence that fluctuation. COVID comes, is a shock. Drought will come, is a shock. But how do we stabilize that? By really kind of futures markets, the issue of SGR, all that kind of stuff. To me, it's possible to do that. I wanted to say something here before we leave. The issue of per diems, and I want to give you my experience. One time I was working for a development partner. So we go to Jogo House and ask, this thing can be done here. And they said nothing. So next week we are meeting to do this. Nothing. I only was told, if you now go to Lake Bogoria, or those particular areas, it will be done.
You bet.
We have to be, gentlemen, we have to be live to what they are going through. What they are going through. Some of them are barely making ends meet. But you can manage that. Let them go out. Actually, this week I was supposed to be in Nakuru, but there was no per diem, so I didn't go. Hey, guys, don't hear me. That's also very serious.
We need to take a short break. Shemo Chodo will circle back with you a minute to take up to 8 o'clock on the nose. We'll take a short break. When we circle back, also the president is very optimistic about the bumper harvest. He says now we are ready to export. Are we? Right, we circle back with that.
I didn't go because of the per diem.